Namaste yogis. This is Adrienne.
And Mia.
And we have a special guest today, Allie Temple. Say hi, Allie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're excited that you're with us today on How Yoga Changed My Life, a podcast. So Allie is a location-independent lifestyle yogi, and I am dying to hear all about you. So tell us, just give us a little intro about yourself.
Sure. Well, I am originally from Vancouver, Canada. I grew up in a small town just outside Vancouver, and I then moved to Los Angeles. I lived there for about 4 years. I skipped way ahead. I just skipped 3 decades of my life in this.
I was going to say, what brought you to LA?
No, I'm so used to just diving right into the yoga stuff that I guess that's the big next step. Yeah. But ultimately, yoga brought me to LA, and there's a whole lot that happened in between. But from there, if we're just talking about where I'm living after LA, I have been traveling full time since then, and that's been about the last 3 years. I've been living primarily in the tropics and just building my business and living free and enjoying my life and learning a lot along the way. So that's just a snippet of what I've gotten to now. And I'm happy to break it down any further, anything that you want to know.
Good. So you're from Canada. And you did skip some decades. So I want you to tell us a little bit. First of all, so location independent lifestyle. So when you first said that to me, and I'm not trying to be rude at all, I was like, she's homeless. I feel bad. But then I realized that this is your lifestyle that makes you happy. It's kind of like a van life. But I want to know, how do you move about the world? Do you travel by air, by plane?
Yeah,
that's the same thing.
I am.
Airplane.
And yes to both. I am homeless. It has been about 3 years since my hubby and I actually did have a home, a real long-term location.
Wow.
And it's been really freeing. We left LA at the end of 2020, which was kind of a ridiculous time to be like, hey, why don't we just start traveling the world
during a pandemic?
Yeah, with everything going on. But we did see that we had an opportunity there working online and all of that. So since then, we've been traveling primarily by plane and living short term in a lot of Airbnbs and short term rentals. A lot of the time has been in Southeast Asia, which has been so incredible. I just spent a year and a half in Southeast Asia just for the last run, and more time before that as well. And to be in a place where you are building your own business and growing your own business, and to live so comfortably surrounded by these beautiful cultures, and really be able to afford to live way better than we were living in LA with full-time jobs.
Well, I bet.
Has been, such a gift. So although you could get this picture in your mind of what that might look like for someone who is technically homeless, I've lived in some of the most beautiful places in the world, and it's been really wonderful. And just more simply too, having just traveling around with a suitcase is very liberating, of course, and it really teaches you how much you don't need.
Right. I watch the tiny house stuff and I'm always like, oh my God, could I live with just 4 things in my house, 400 square feet or 40 square feet? That's really impressive, to be honest, because I think about all the stuff that we carry around with us everywhere we go, and not being that tied to it is really, really cool. Where were you in Southeast Asia?
This past year and a half, we did a year in Thailand, which was just life-changing. And we had kind of a home base in Phuket for a lot of that time. So we did actually have a whole 6-month lease.
Oh, wow.
And that was nice. And then we could jump around Thailand and fly to the other side of the country for the weekend. And we were still able to have a bit of a home base there. And then from there, we were in Vietnam for the last few months before heading back over here to North America just for the summer. And spent some time in Bali as well. earlier
Awesome.
on the trip. And yeah, those are the three main locations in Asia that we've spent lengthier amounts of time.
Very nice. That business that you mentioned that you've created and you're working for yourself, is it centered around yoga?
It absolutely is centered around yoga. Yes.
Very
So
nice.
I am a retreat leader and a yoga teacher, business mentor, and I have taught yoga now for about a decade and practiced yoga for 2 decades. So I have a huge history with this practice, and I really would literally not be where I am today without having started yoga 20 years ago and having teaching it for 10. And when we started our journey in 2020, and I was teaching at 3 very successful studios in LA. I had worked really hard to get to that point. I was the lead teacher, I was the teacher development manager. And then, of course, everything stopped, right? And I was sitting in my little LA apartment, twiddling my thumbs, and started to uncover a whole lot of limiting beliefs that were keeping me playing small and not really stepping into my full potential as a business owner. And I had always wanted to host retreats. I had tried in the past, and it was unsuccessful. And I had been mentoring teachers through other studios for many years. And since everything was online, that was when I started to build up the courage to start to create meditations online and start to do the online yoga stuff a little bit and start to plan my first retreats. And eventually that just turned into a full-on business. And it's been about 2 years that I've been full-time, just working for myself, hosting
Mm.
retreats around the world and coaching other yoga teachers and wellness entrepreneurs really how to do that themselves. Because I think that so many of us suffer from this imposter syndrome or the self-doubt or the limiting beliefs that are keeping us playing small. And you've probably heard me talk about this on Instagram, and it's something I'm so passionate about because that was me for so long. And even as I peel back the layers, that stuff still comes back around. It never really leaves, I
Yeah.
don't think.
I don't think it does either.
And
Yeah.
yeah, like you always, you get to the next level and then it comes back around. And that's one of the things that I love about being an entrepreneur is there's always going to be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me and the jobs that I've had in the past, I've worked really hard to get to a certain level, whether it's yoga related or other jobs that I've had. I reach that level and then I just kind of am like, okay, what else can I do? What's next?
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur and someone traveling full time, it really it's not boring.
No.
Good.
Well, no, what's neat about
Yeah.
it too is that like when you feel that kind of itch or that movement that you need, you can just pick up and go. There's no,
Yeah.
strings or ties that are tying you. And like, it's kind of freeing, like really freeing from what it sounds like. I applaud you. I think that's amazing. I want to know what your yoga origin story is. So like, when did you first encounter yoga?
hmm I started doing yoga when I was about 18. And growing up in Canada, I was a competitive figure skater, as you are,
Ooh,
in
nice.
Canada. Yes. So I was an athlete that all through my teen years, I had a ton of back problems. I would go to the chiropractor. They would tell me, just quit skating and you'll be fine. And I was a teenage girl with a passion. And I was like laughing at them, thinking, well, that's not going to happen. And I
Mm-hmm.
eventually got to the point when I was 18, I was shifting from being the athlete to being the coach. And I thought now's a good time to start trying to repair some of the damage that I've done over the years and heal my back. And also, it's a way for me to stay in shape. So it was completely physical. I think the first yoga class that I ever took was really slow and gentle and more of a restorative kind of yoga Pilates situation. And me being a competitive athlete, I was not so into
I
it.
was gonna say, yeah,
Struggled, I bet.
I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
have struggled too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know that feeling.
I was not at a point in my life where I was really looking for stillness to any degree.
Right.
That came much, much later. And so my relationship for that first decade was quite off and on with yoga. And shortly after, I discovered the power flows and the vinyasa flows, and I got way more into it because this was something where I could push myself and something a little bit more familiar that I was used to as an athlete. And I would go through phases where I would be really consistent with my practice, and then I would fall out of it. And then I started my first hot yoga practice, and that was at a studio that was very, very intense.
Mhm.
And we all can imagine that studio.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
part of me,
Yes.
yeah, like part of me was like, yes, this is it. Like, this is what I want. I'm getting pushed, and this is so familiar to me. And my body is flexible and remembering all of these things I used to do when I was an athlete. And then part of me was also like, I also kind of hate this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going back and forth for a while. And after that, I eventually found another hot yoga studio that I really felt much more connected to. And this was years later, where a whole lot happened in my life in my 20s. I had a lot of ups and downs, and I found this other studio that was really more about listening to your body and offering more variety. And I started to learn how to listen to my body and what that even meant.
Mhm.
And then I started to understand that slowing down is actually very insightful, and there's so much power in slowing down. And from there, that led to me taking my first teacher training close to 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that too. We found a lot of people do find yoga right around their late teens, early 20s, and learning from being an athlete and being a mover and not a still person and having to try to learn how to slow down. So, what really brought you back to your mat? Like, you practiced, you said you were kind of on and off. You had shifts in your life. Do you want to go into any detail about kind of what would bring you back to your mat?
Yeah, the one really pivotal moment I think that shifted yoga into being a consistent pillar in my life. I was in my mid 20s, mid to late 20s, and I had been going through a toxic relationship for 4 years off and on. And that was when I started going to this first yoga studio that I felt really connected to. And I finally one day went to a yoga class at this studio. It was a live music yoga class with this singer who just has the voice of an angel. And I just bawled my eyes out and realized, like, it's time to move on with my life and end this chapter. And I went home and I ended that relationship. And from then on, really was the shift in this practice is giving me so much more. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about that. So much more than a physical practice. And it's brought me back to myself. And when I look back at moments like that, I realize that yoga has really taught me freedom. It has brought me freedom, not only physically in my body, but mentally, emotionally, and even location wise. Like, really, it just keeps coming back to how yoga has created and cultivated a life of freedom for me. So that was a turning point where I was like, I got to do this all the time. And I want to learn everything there is to know about it. And I want to share it with other people so that they can feel any amount of freedom in their bodies and minds, similar to what I'm feeling.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I agree with you. I think that it's interesting when you say like what brought you back, because a lot of times it's more what took you away, because there's things that take you away from your mat. And it could just be like even around the holidays or the beginning of school right now is going on here. So like the kids are starting back to school. And I noticed that that's when people aren't showing up to their mat. Right. And it's like, but really, this is where you should be coming, because your life will be happier and you'll be nicer to everyone around you if you keep your yoga practice up. But it does pull you away. You want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
So I would imagine, and you've spoken to this freedom, I would imagine that's kind of been this shift in the past 3 years, right? Being independent, location independent, being homeless, being location independent, like leaning into, being your own boss, being a business owner. Can you talk to what the difference was, for those nearly 20 years versus these past 3 years? Like, what happened? What was that shift for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the shift for me was, I touched on it really briefly, but summer of 2020, when I was forced to just sit and reflect on what was working in my life and what was going right and where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be doing, and start to work through. I did a lot of my own meditation. I did a lot of just mindset work and releasing blocks that I didn't realize were there, that were keeping me playing small. And I realized that I can do this. I have had other moments in my life where I've been pretty courageous and taken risks that don't make a lot of sense. That was a pattern that I've done in the past. So that wasn't new to me, but this was a big one. This was like, how can I actually build my dream life without listening to the people who are saying it's not going to work, or it's not the right time, or you don't have this, or you're not ready for that. And it just came down to sitting and releasing anything that was holding me back. And we came up with a plan as well, my husband and I, and we said, let's plan to do this for a year. We'll travel for a year. And we've been able to continue working. We have the income to support us. We can always come back at the end of the year and then figure out the next steps. So I didn't put that much pressure on myself, really, where I knew that I might as well give this a shot. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back and I'll figure out the next step. And that was what took me on this journey. And it's 3 years now. And it's been interesting now at this point, because now I'm back in North America for the summer. And to me, being back here after being in Mexico and Bali and Thailand and Vietnam, I'm a little bit less comfortable here in these beautiful homes in the US, in California, and in Vancouver, because I'm again being tested with who I am and what has shifted for me over the last few years, and what my yoga practice looks like now, because I'm a completely different person than I was, as we all are, a few years ago. But really just being vulnerable with meeting myself through being here around people who are doing their thing and comfortable and living a life that they are very familiar with. And it's not really a life that I feel that familiar with anymore.
Yeah. Now, how did you meet? I'm interested because you have a husband that does this with you. That must be kind of difficult to find a partner that's like, hey, you want to be, homeless with me in a loving way. That's a big deal. And so how did you guys meet? Like, what does he do for a living to make him be able to do this with you?
We met, so a little backtrack to when I did my first yoga teacher training. This was, about a decade ago. So this was before I met him, but this just leads into how we got here. I was living in Vancouver. I found out that the training I wanted to do was in LA, and I love the sunshine. I always want to be somewhere new in the sun. I wanted to just move to LA and become a yoga teacher. And of course, that was insane. I was a Canadian. I didn't have a visa. I had never taught yoga before, but I decided to quit both of my jobs, put all my stuff in storage back then, and just go to LA. And so I did my teacher training in LA and could not stay, had nowhere to teach, tried to stay for as long as I could, and started teaching yoga on the beach in Santa Monica to strangers and just tried to get experience where I could. Eventually, I had to come back because it's a whole other story, but the border had flagged me and
Oh, no way.
they knew what I was up to, and they were like, you can go for a few months, but you have to be back by this date.
They're like, we're
And so,
calling you home. You're grounded.
yeah. So
Canada
I
grounded
came.
you.
Well, actually, it was the Americans, and
it's the
they're like,
US. Oh, the Americans.
we know what you're up to, Missy. You don't belong in this country. Off
They
you
were
go.
kicking you out. I get it.
Yeah. Yes. And so I went back to Vancouver. I really didn't feel connected to being in that city. I think I just have always wanted something else, something more. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make the most of this. I'm going to do my best and start teaching at some studios here. I'll gain some experience, and then I'll figure out a way to get to LA. Like, it was still on my mind. I was like, I'm going to figure it out somehow. And so once I settled back in Vancouver and started teaching and got kind of comfortable, that's when I met my now husband. And I remember on our first date, I was telling him that everything is temporary. And he knew that I didn't want to be in Vancouver, and he had just moved back to Vancouver. He was living elsewhere in Canada. And we just really connected and we really clicked. And so we had this great relationship. I had a great teaching job. I had a great apartment. Everything was good. About a year passed, and the LA studios where I did my first teacher training, they were expanding. They were growing 2 more studios, and they offered me a 5-year work visa to move to LA
Wow.
and follow my dreams and
Awesome.
start teaching there and living there. So I was like, sorry, babe, this is what I'm doing. And hopefully you'll come with me. And thank goodness he did. And so we moved to LA. We were there for 4 years. And so he was working in the tree care industry and forestry and arboriculture. And when he got to LA, he was not able to work legitimately just yet. He was waiting on his work permit. And a company really wanted to hire him. And they were like, we could pay you in Bitcoin.
No way.
And so this was in 2017. And
When,
he was like, I don't
Bitcoin
really
was just
know.
entering the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was like, I don't really know much about that, but hey, if I can cash it every 2 weeks and pay my bills until I get my work permit, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of his role now. He is obsessed with Bitcoin, and he teaches others how to responsibly learn about it. And he is very passionate about the future of Bitcoin. And so he just took that was his intro to his next path and just ran with it. And when we left in 2020, the market, the cryptocurrency market, was at a place where he could easily work and support himself. And it just like opened up this gate to, okay, now's the time. Let's go travel and see what happens.
That's so awesome. I love that.
Out of curiosity, you've used this, phrase playing small like a few times. I think as yoga teachers, I have an idea of maybe what that means or looks like or feels like.
Oh.
But can you tell our listeners, especially those who are not yoga teachers, like, what is playing small as a yoga teacher?
Playing small to me makes me think about how, especially as yoga teachers, we hold ourselves back from standing in our power. And often it can cause you to not charge enough or not create the things that you want to create that are for you and that you're passionate about. And just having the fear of really truly stepping into your authenticity so that you can make a bigger impact. And for me, this is something that I've dealt with beyond yoga, but especially as a yoga teacher as well. It's a limiting belief that has come back around for me many times, which I'm sure is why I bring it up now. But I work with a lot of yoga teachers who are moving through these limiting beliefs as well, because I see the potential in what happens when you actually do step back and work through those mindset blocks and find the right guidance and support to actually push forward into creating your dream life. And that is, to me, playing small, what playing small means.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I was interesting because I was having a conversation the other day with Mia about 200-hour teachers all coming out of 200-hour training right now. And especially since COVID, which is great that we have online teacher training. So I'm not bashing that at all, because I do think that those are great. I think it's just hard in the sense of that one-on-one, the assisting, the adjusting, right? The personal touch or the personal space. And then thinking about, what do you do after 200 hour? How do you find your teacher voice? Because people think, I go through 200 hour and I'm going to go from this person right here to all of a sudden I'm like, boom, I'm this beautiful yoga teacher, right? Who knows everything in the world about yoga, and I can stand up and do anything. And it's more like you feel like you don't know anything at all sometimes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I went through that when I started teaching. I was so terrified to begin teaching. I had never put myself out there like that before. It's such a vulnerable position, and you have to just get comfortable in your own skin. And I think for so many of us, we can kind of breeze through life helping other people, especially as for me, I'm a very sensitive person. I'm totally an empath, and I like to help other people and shine the light on them so that I am smaller and help them out. And I think that when I started my yoga teaching journey, I could not use my own voice. It took me years to find it. And then that came back around when I started to shift online and create my own offerings again, because I hadn't fully dealt with that yet. I was terrified to go on video. It's still not comfortable for me. I'm totally an introvert. It's not second nature, but you do it and it gets easier. And same with teaching yoga. You start teaching, you find the right people to surround yourself with and to learn from, and you practice, and it gets easier, and you start to build your confidence and grow. And the same thing with building your own business. I think it's so similar in that way, where you have to get used to putting yourself out there in a new way, build confidence, practice, and surround yourself with the right people who are going to support you so that you don't have to go through it alone.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I was a very extroverted person my whole life. I'm still extroverted to a certain degree, but I feel like since becoming a yoga teacher, I don't know if it's the energy that you exchange in a yoga class or what it is, but I've gotten super more socially anxious when I'm in big groups or going out. I don't want to as much. I want to stay home. I want to be grounded. So it's almost trying to find that balance. But it was interesting that getting up and teaching a yoga class made me cry for the first time. Whereas I worked for Coors Brewing Company for years and did presentations in front of hundreds of men. That didn't bother me, but this did. And I think it's a very personal thing. It is something to do with your energy. And I didn't really think about it from the standpoint of I want to be this amazing yoga teacher. It was I just wanted to share yoga with other people. Like you said, it wasn't about me. It was about other people. It's interesting.
Yeah, I definitely went through some of that as well. When I started teaching, I kind of had this idea of, well, I've been a coach because I was coaching figure skating for 10 years prior or longer. And I was like, okay, I'm used to teaching people. I teach people every day. So this is going to be kind of the same thing. And oh my God, no.
Right.
It was I don't know what happened to me during that teacher training where, those first few moments where you have to teach a little sequence or you're put on the spot to share something or get someone into a pose, just terrified.
Yes.
Because like you said, it's so personal and you're so vulnerable and it's something new. And even if you've been in roles where you are sharing something or teaching something, yoga is just like, I think it's just because it's so intertwined with life, and living our yoga is something that comes out in our teaching. And we might not quite be ready for that, especially after 200 hours or less of teacher training. Like these are lived experiences that you have to move through and practice through in order to get comfortable in your own skin with teaching.
Absolutely. So did you do any other teacher trainings besides the 200-hour? What other trainings have you done?
Yeah, I've got over 1,000 hours, and my initial was 500 hours, and then I went on kind of the first 2 years of my teaching. I was also that teacher that had total imposter syndrome and thought she needed to do every single teacher training under the sun.
You're preaching to the choir right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me too. I did 2 years. It
Yeah.
was like I did ripped off the band-aid, did so much training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, I mean, almost like you name it, I probably did it. And that definitely came back to me not feeling good enough and not feeling ready and not able to put myself out there. And yeah, so I did a lot of teacher trainings. And one thing that I tell teachers now is that teacher trainings are awesome. I love them, and there's a place for them, and you should continue to grow and learn as a teacher, definitely. But you need to recognize whether you are taking another teacher training in order to kind of, once again, keep yourself playing small and stay in that comfortable student role,
Yeah. Like
wherein you could
self-soothing.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's familiar, it's comfortable, you're not being put on the spot, you're a student, and that's great, and I love that space. I could spend my whole life there, and I would be very comfortable. But if you've taken a lot of trainings and you're not getting to the place you want to get to with creating whatever it is you want to create, then maybe look at instead investing that time, energy, and money into learning about business or getting support from a mentor who is going to push you out of your comfort zone and actually help you get closer to what you want to create in the world.
Mm-hmm. So when you were talking about kind of the, what brought you back to your mat, and like, when did you kind of feel this urge to change and to grow into your own company? Like what are some of the things that kind of forced you off your mat and into more of like this remote business area?
Or if I can tack on to that,
go
we
for
know it was 3 years ago. Had you tried previously to those 3 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because it was that moment where I was just forced to sit and reflect, that was when I started to put myself out there. I had definitely tried prior. So when I was teaching in LA full time, I was hosting workshops. I had tried to run a retreat a couple of times. I was, yeah, doing a few different events and everything, but it was always through the support of the studio. And I used that as I was in my comfort zone there. I had that support from them. And so I was never really forced to learn how to promote anything or like any of the business stuff. I
Right.
was just kind of coasting on the comfort of the studio, picking up the slack for me. So I had dabbled, but I wasn't seeing the results I wanted. And I really was yearning for more, but I was spending all of my time teaching at the studio and helping out the studio, that all of my energy, I was burnt out. I was just exhausted from everything that I had going on with the studio, that I didn't have anything left to invest into the growth of my own business at that time.
That I think runs into a lot of teachers run into that issue because, I mean, how many classes were you teaching a week? If you're teaching a lot of classes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. I
know?
was teaching a lot, and I was doing a lot behind the scenes with the studios. I was the teacher development manager and lead teacher. I was doing all the scheduling. We had 3 studios where each studio had like 12 to 15 classes a day. We had like over 40 teachers that I was scheduling and training, and the list went on and on. And on top of that, I was teaching in the heat, and my body was not happy teaching in the heat. So I kept trying to teach less and less to honor my body. I would go to acupuncture, my acupuncturist would tell me, just quit your job. And it's funny, I just have this flashback to when I was skating and they were telling me to quit skating.
Yeah.
Like, but I would laugh and I would be like, no, because then I was living in LA and I was there on this work visa and I loved what I did, but it just wasn't sustainable. So it was like this vicious cycle. And I see it all of the time with
All
teachers,
the time.
right? Trying to make a decent paycheck and trying to make a living, doing what you're passionate about doing. But then you start to see your own health and wellness start to go. Your personal practice is the first thing that disappears. And all of a sudden, you're really not practicing what you preach. And you start to question, like, how is this a sustainable living in the first place?
Oh,
so
yeah.
all of that stuff is like what brought me to consider doing something differently 3 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, no. And for me too, because I worked in a studio, managed a studio. I helped open a couple different studios from like, ground up kind of thing. And as a teacher and as someone very similar passionate about yoga, we will give everything that we have to them because we believe in it and we want it to work and we want to be a part of it and we want to see it do well. And then you realize, like, wait, who's taking care of me? Because unfortunately, studios, they don't care if you want to teach 15, 20 classes a week. 15, 20 classes a week is what you're going to teach. That's 40 hours of time. If you think about a 20 class schedule, that's 40 hours a week. That doesn't count travel time. That doesn't count preparation time. And it's a lot. It's a lot for people to handle. So tell us a little bit about your company and what you're doing and kind of, I want to hear some like examples of people that you've worked with and some stories.
Yeah, I kind of have two sides to the company because I still, of course, love sharing yoga and other healing modalities. So on that side, I host several retreats a year, specifically more so for other empaths and sensitive people to help them protect and build and rejuvenate their energy. So it's been really cool to get to kind of plan those around my travels and get to spend time like for a month or so in a location before hosting a retreat there. So I hosted a retreat just in BC, Canada this past summer, which was really lovely because all of the other retreats have been overseas. And so this was back home and that was nice. And earlier this year, I hosted one in Phuket, Thailand when I was there. So that is a piece of my business that really fuels me with inspiration and the in-person connection, of course, for someone like me who travels full time and who works remotely and is mostly on my computer every day. It really just fuels me to keep going when I get to have those in-person events and connect with students. So that is the one side. And then the other side is supporting other yoga teachers and wellness entrepreneurs with getting started to create their own unique offerings, to start to build and grow their audience and their client base, and to just deal with the mindset piece because that's key in how we start. And then to start to figure out who they are serving, what problem they're solving, and dialing that in. And I had a membership for a year where I was helping different yoga teachers do that kind of stuff. And I now have just created a 9-week course that I'm really excited about. And that's going to be launching in September. And it's really just a foundational course because I know for me, when I started dipping my toe into creating my own offerings, independent of a studio, I was completely overwhelmed and had no idea where to start or where to spend my time or how to do it and what to do. So that's what this course is all about. And then I also work one-on-one with teachers and other entrepreneurs who are ready to just take it to the next level and start really creating a sustainable and thriving business. So I've had some great one-on-one clients, even just this past year. I started out just sharing this with yoga teachers, and I realized that there are others that want this support as well. So I've had everyone from like beginner yoga teachers who just finished their YTT and wanted to start getting into studios. I've mentored them one-on-one, to I've had viral TikTokers come to me and ask me to be their business coach because they want to shift from the kind of entertainment space to something that is more heartfelt and supportive, and growing communities that is more authentic to them. So anyone who really feels passionate about stepping into their authentic selves and creating not only a business, but a lifestyle that works for you. Because I think that, especially over the past few years, we've seen things differently, and not everyone wants to continue on that path of comfort and predictability. And I think that since so many people have been seeing what I'm doing, they're like, I want a piece of that. Like, where do I start? So that's what I've been really enjoying sharing with others. And especially the travel piece. I'm going to be sharing a lot more on that in the coming months, because it sounds, I mean, I don't know what it sounds like to you guys other than worrying about me being homeless.
I don't worry about you being homeless because I know that you're happy. You're a happy homeless person.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you need to have a home to be happy, right? Like we just talked about that. But no, I think it's very inspiring that you're able to, with a loved one, with a spouse, go and live in different places for as long as you want to. You know, I think that is beautiful. I have 2 girls and a husband that he travels for work all the time. So his thing is, let's stay home. You know what I mean? He just wants to be home. But I think it's amazing.
Inspiring, but I would imagine what you're going to say is like intangible. Like it's hard to kind of say like, okay, now what step do I take? Because Adrienne knows and she's asked me not to. My partner and I want to travel for a year.
Yeah.
I say ask me not to because of the podcast. But we've kind of started to figure some things out, but it's like, okay, so first you have to have a job that you're able to take with you remotely, and then you got to know where you're going and where to put your cats and what to do with your house and things like that. So I would imagine, but that's kind of like, even though I know these are the things, it's like, it's a standstill, you know?
Yeah, totally. And the point that you're at, where I was in 2020, is the hardest place to be, because there are so many reasons why you can talk yourself out of doing it, and so many tough things to get through. We had a cat that we absolutely loved. Like, he got me through COVID. It was me and him. My husband was traveling a lot for work at that time. And we didn't want to give him up, but we also decided that we really want this. And thankfully, we had family, my parents, who have a very stable and comfortable life that is much more fitting for him anyway, because we used to try and take him on van life, camping trips, and all these kinds of things that he just did not belong at.
A cat in the wild. That would have been hard. Cat's like, what the fuck are you doing to me, Mom? I want to be home.
Totally. So it was better off for him. But it's all the little things where, again, it comes down to mindset, I think, because you can make this list of things like, how bad is it if you get rid of half of your belongings that you never use anyway, or you put them in storage for the year and then decide if you want to keep them or not? And how bad is it going to be if you let someone down? Like, I, of course, was still working for the studios when we left, and I continued to work for them remotely for a year, which I was grateful for, because that really helped me while I was starting to grow my business. I think for the first year, when you are just starting out, it's really great to have some steady income. And I just got to the point where I was in Bali in my villa at the pool, like trying to hire yoga teachers to reopen the studio in LA. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense anymore. But basically, I just mean to say that it can sound really unrealistic to actually make the move and to travel, whether it's for taking your job on the road for a month or 6 months or a year or indefinitely. But there is a lot that I've learned in the last 3 years. And I am starting a podcast on this specific topic. So maybe I can have
Yes,
you
we
guys
would
on. Yeah.
absolutely.
And
That's awesome. Keep going.
yeah.
I interrupted
Well,
you.
I just think like basically the final thought on that is once you're actually doing it, you realize that it's totally doable. It's just the before part where you can stop yourself because of all of these reasons. But I think, I mean, especially with the podcast, it's a podcast. You don't have to be in the same room.
Exactly. No, you're right. You're right. We don't.
I'm with Mia on this one.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting there. I like the sound quality so far.
Yeah,
so I'm
this
good
has
with
been
this.
a good reason as to why we can't take it
Great.
virtually.
I know. Now she's like,
Yeah.
we got to find a house for my cats.
Yeah.
So what I want to know, like, over the past 3 years of having this independent lifestyle, this freedom to be able to move about, what has been your pit and what has been your peak?
Yeah, there definitely have been so many challenges, and I don't want to sugarcoat it and make it sound like 100% glamorous. I think for me, the biggest challenge of traveling full time is just the lack of feeling connected to others and community. And so over time, I realized that I need to start prioritizing not only my well-being and taking care of myself on the road, but how I am able to stay connected to others that are like-minded and that I like just people in general, especially when you add building the business piece, because I was spending, like when we first left, we were in Mexico and I was spending like 10 or 12 hours a day just on my computer in this beautiful apartment in Playa del Carmen, like where the beach was down the street. And I finally got to the point where I was like, why am I doing all of this if I'm not enjoying it along the way? So that was a point where I started to shift and set boundaries and realize that I know I need this business in order to keep traveling, but if I can't enjoy the travel while I grow the business, then it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think too, after doing it for, as many years as you have, and being in Vietnam and being in Phuket and being in Thailand and Bali, like you've made connections there. So now it's almost like your home is now you're worldwide, bitch, right? Like you're worldwide. Like you got homes everywhere, right? But I can understand that too, that connectedness of others. So then what's been the peak of it so far? What's been the best part?
You know, it's funny because now I think of everything that I've been through, and it's the same. It's the connections that I have made in these places that have completely changed my life and the course of my life forever. So you're totally right. Like we learned that moving like once a month was not sustainable for us and started to slow down, especially the full year in Thailand. When we decided to be 1 year in relatively the same place, at least the same country, it seemed like all of these synchronicities just started to happen, and I was meeting all of the right people. And for sure, I've had experiences in Thailand that I will never forget. One of them being working with an insanely powerful energy healer who taught me Qigong and really changed the way that I see my life. And I wouldn't have met him if it weren't for yoga. I met him as through someone else who I met because I was a yoga teacher. And I spent 100 hours with this man working one-on-one, face-to-face, just really, like, it's hard for me to even put this into words, but after spending that time of learning how to build my own power and work with energy, I've seen that now I'm meeting everyone I do meet is for the right reason. I have such a clear vision of what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. I have just so much more lightness in my mind and my body around my path. And that was really like the game changer for my entire life, spending that time with that healer.
That my friend, she lives in Chicago and she is a Tai Chi and a Qigong teacher. And she has told me like a little bit about it. So for our listeners that don't know what it is, would you just give like a little brief? What is Qigong?
Qigong is basically the practice of energy, working with energy. And it can mean different things in that context to different people. And the style that I was practicing was very physics based. It was a little bit less traditional, and it was very feeling and physics based. And the biggest takeaway that I learned from this specific teacher was, especially as someone who is a teacher and a healer, I have always felt like I need to rest and slow down and take care of myself. And I agree that those things are true. But this teacher taught me that I actually have the ability to build my power, which will help me as a sensitive person to stay strong and to not have these energy leaks that are making me burn out and, not be able to show up fully for others. So learning how to build my power through Qigong and energy work is something that I do every day, and it has really changed my life.
It's amazing. I love it.
Where can people find you?
I am on Instagram more than I should be. It's at Ali Temple Yoga. So definitely find me there, say hello, send me a DM. And I am always updating what I'm up to on Instagram. You can also find ways to get onto my list to learn about my upcoming programs and one-on-one coaching and retreats and all of that good stuff that I have coming up.
Yeah. We're in, end of September or end of September. We're in the end of summer right now. So what do you have planned for the next few months that we can tell our listeners about?
Yeah, I have the new 9-week course coming up in September. So that's going to be launching very soon. Leading up to that, I am offering a free masterclass September 6th. And I'll be sharing 3 simple secrets for wellness biz success. So for those who have heard my story and you might be kind of curious on how to get started with building your yoga business or your wellness business, definitely jump in and join us on September 6th. There will be a replay if you're catching this after as well. And that'll be a great way to just learn a little bit more about how to start building your business without getting totally overwhelmed, because I've been there and I don't want anyone else to have to go through that too.
Agreed. Well, we will link all of your information in the show notes for our listeners. And thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I'm just excited to see where you go next. I'm going to keep my eye on you and we'll check back in with you soon. Because yoga changes your life, but it doesn't just change it once. It happens often. So where's your next retreat?
My next retreat, I will tell you, but I haven't announced it yet. It is in Mexico in February.
Oh,
so
nice.
We're heading back to Sayulita, which is where I held a retreat in 2022. And we just had the best time. It was so fun. And I'm going back to the same place in Sayulita and really looking forward to that. So I'll be launching that next month as well.
Amazing. Oh, I want to go on a retreat so badly. I've been talking about that for a while. I was supposed to host one twice in Costa Rica the past 2 years, but got kind of kicked out of those. So anyway, but studio
Things don't pan out.
Studio politics, always interesting. So I really love that you're out there in the world helping people, because when it comes to yoga teachers, and we see it all the time, they come out and they feel really lost and they don't know what to do. They end up getting burned out. They end up having high turnover rates. They don't get paid enough money, and then they feel imposter syndrome or play small. And it's good to have people like you out there, Ali, building us up and knowing that we can play big.
Yeah, I went through all of that stuff. So if I can make it to the other side, then everybody else can too. And I'm so happy to get to support others on their journey.
I'm so excited you went to Bali. I've always wanted to go to Bali, by the way. I think that place is so beautiful. How long were you there for?
It is. We were there for about 6 months.
Wow.
And this was in 2021. So it was our second destination. And so we wanted to do Thailand, and Thailand wasn't open yet. And so we were like, okay, let's do Bali. And we got there basically within that first week. They shut down the island because the Delta variant hit. Like, it was still so early.
Right.
So it was really interesting because we got a taste of Bali where there was like no one there, no foreigners, and it was quiet and a lot of stuff wasn't open, but we were able to give back to the locals who were in a really challenging positions financially, and just to see the island in a way that probably no one will ever see it again, just quiet, and because it's so full of tourists. And then we went back last year for a few weeks, and it was just crazy busy with all the Aussies. Like, the Aussies just go, it's like they're Mexico.
Yeah,
so
my
they
dad
just
lives
go there
there.
and party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He lives in Perth, Australia. So he's actually here visiting us for the month. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. But we are planning to go back, I think, in March. And I think that June, well, actually, I don't think it's final as of yesterday. I'm going to host a retreat in Bali in June. And I'm actually working with another company to set it up. And I'm really excited.
All right. Well, you better keep us in touch, because I definitely, if our podcast starts to get advertisers, we're going to Bali. We'll join you in Bali. Well, if you're in San Antonio and you're I love you're
Texas.
my new.
We'll find you in
we'll
Texas
find you in
anywhere.
Texas anywhere. If you ever need anything, you've got our numbers. You know where we are.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, for sure, let's stay connected. I look forward to chatting more soon.
Yeah, and I want to hear about your podcast too. Definitely.
Yes.
We'd love to have you back on about that too.
Yeah, that's going to launch in November. So it's called The Traveling Wellnesspreneur. And I really just want to help people the entrepreneurs who want to start traveling and make it sustainable and do it without the fear and all of that stuff. So lots of tips around that.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, Allie.
Have a great Saturday.
Thanks
so
Allie.
much.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
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 Our first virtual interview.
I know, right? So cool. It was so neat. I was so nervous the whole time, thinking like it's going to sound shitty or we're going to not get the same like vibe that we do when we're one-on-one in person. But Allie made it so simple for us.
She's a pro.
Yeah,
She's
totally. Totally. Yeah, I got such a kick out of her story and just learning about how free she's been with her life over the past, 3 years now. Location independent lifestyle, # not homeless. She took that really well from me. I was very impressed. Yeah, but just the amount of things that she's gotten to do, just very liberating. You know, she took her life on the road, and she has not only created a nice lifestyle for herself, but she's able to go and impact people in other places and experience other cultures and learn and grow from those on her own.
Right. And then share that with people. I think the life that she's created for herself is very aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I see it on TikTok, I see it on Instagram, people who, she calls it location independent, right? And a lot of people call it nomadic, the nomadic lifestyle, things like that. But being able to work remotely and live wherever you want, whenever you want, is like the goal, right?
Yeah.
I've seen Facebook groups about it. And so very aspirational, but it seems very hard to obtain.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the exact same time, she's telling you it's extremely possible. You just have to believe in yourself and not limit yourself, which I think people need to hear.
Absolutely. And if you think about when she did this at the end of 2020 during COVID.
Right.
Like she couldn't have picked a more crazy time to decide to be a location independent lifestyle liver. She could have waited. She could have done it at a different time. But I think one of the things that she does a great job of talking about is the idea of imposter syndrome, the idea of like limiting your beliefs on yourself and not thinking that you have everything that you need and that you have to do something different, or you need to go take another training or go back to college, or, you know, you limit yourself so much by the experiences that we've had in the past and, you know, our perceptions of reality. And I feel like for her, she, instead of saying like, oh, there's so many limits that I would have to overcome, she instead she looked at it and said, no, these are all things that I can do. I can overcome these.
Right. And I think for her, maybe it happened because it was right time at the, you know, right place at the right time. You know, being a yoga teacher, when COVID happened, you lost your job.
Yeah.
You had no choice but to now be independent of your job, right? You know, what a nice way to say unemployed, independent of your job.
Right.
And so maybe that's kind of what allowed her to see that, because I could see on the complete flip narrative, like COVID is very uncertain. Why bring another level of uncertainty into my life? But right. No, definitely.
Well, and if you think too, going back to what you just said, like COVID hit, and no one really talks about this. Like a lot of people lost their jobs, but pretty much the fitness industry in general was hit super hard.
Yeah.
Because we were together in a space and having to learn to, you know, do online classes, do Instagram Live, do, you know, Zoom classes.
Yeah, virtual offerings
and all that stuff. First of all, as a yoga teacher, you're not taught how to hold space for someone over Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to be in the room with them. That's the culture of yoga, is like it's a group, it's a yoke, it's a union. So to have it not be that way and having to recreate ourselves in different ways, that was super hard. And I feel like for her, she took that, instead of being like, oh, this is going to kill my career, my life is over. She's like, fuck it, let's pack up and move, and let's be independent with where we live, and let's enjoy ourselves. And I mean, I haven't heard of another story of someone doing that during the pandemic and having a successful time with it.
At least personally. Definitely. And I think that's a really great transition to the component of yoga philosophy that we want to share with all of you today. It's, you know, one of our goals to kind of connect these conversations to the teachings of yoga. And so first, we have a sutra for you, Adrienne.
Yep. So it is Sutra 2.14. Our actions determine how we experience ease or pain.
Our actions determine how we experience ease or pain.
Yep. And even if you take it back, right? Like if you're, let's take it down to like something very, very basic, right? Like the actions that you take in your life, you can either be going down a good road or going down a bad road, right? So say you're angry at someone and you have all of this anger that's building up inside of you. And that person, you know what, let me restart that because I think I have a good example here. Road rage, right? We all experienced road rage in the past. So you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off, you get angry about it, you hold on to that anger, and you keep going. And you keep going through your day, and you're holding on to this anger about somebody who cut you off in traffic. That person probably has no idea that they did that. They're not paying attention. They're not carrying that anger around, but you are. And then that anger impacts your entire day. It impacts how you perceive things. It impacts your relationships with others. Even if you're, you know, not bringing that anger to surface, it's still within you, right? So it's like every experience we have, we get to decide how we hold on to those and how we let go of those. And when it comes to, for me with road rage, I know that yoga's helped me because I don't get angry about road rage anymore. You know, I may yell for a second and then I'm fine. I let it go. I release it. But when you're in a situation where, you know, life is changing and you've got to make a decision like, hey, am I going to stay or am I going to go? You have to have that trust in yourself that you have what you need and you can go through hard things and you don't have to hold on to them. So if the more that we can kind of get out of our own heads, to get out of our own ways, our experiences are our experiences. You know, even if you and I witness a car accident, we're both going to see it differently, right? You'll see different elements of it than I will. And our experience, although happened at the same time, will impact us differently. Maybe you've been in a car accident that was similar to that, right? So that brought off a memory for you or a feeling for you. Maybe, I've never seen a car accident before, and that was my first one. So maybe it's super traumatic. Does that make sense?
It does. I think also, when we're thinking about, I imagine a lot of our listeners are yogis in some way, shape, or form. I know a number of you are also yoga teachers. It can be really hard to perhaps envision what your future looks like as a yoga instructor because of your experiences in yoga studios, because of your experiences offering classes, because of your experience maybe with something like social media.
Mm-hmm.
And so a career as a yoga teacher can be tough.
Oh.
It can be tough because you depend on so many factors, right? You depend on a studio, you depend on a studio owner, you depend on your co-teachers, you depend on
your
these students, right? And so I think that's what Ali is talking about as it relates to how do we navigate these experiences and then also liberate ourselves from them or find ways where we are dependent on ourselves.
Yes.
Right? And I think, there's this idea of, Adrienne and I talk about this a lot, of doing something before you're ready versus waiting and planning, right? For me, there's a happy medium.
Yes.
I will plan and get things in order before I launch because I think just jumping off before you're ready is careless.
Well, and I agree with you. For me, I'm a worrier. I'm an anxious ADHDer. So I do my research. I figure things out ahead of time, but I won't always have that knowing knowledge within that I can do it, right? I'll have that nervous energy and recognizing the nervous energy is a good thing. And I think being able to then channel that nervous energy into producing what you want to have happen instead of letting that nervous energy hold you back.
Right. So if what's holding you back is just the belief that you're not capable or the belief that people won't receive or the belief that this isn't the right time, that is, I think, the conversation.
Yep.
Then I think you need to, I like the word sankalpa, right? It's your true heart's intention and desire. That is something to kind of meditate with. Think over, like, what is your intention for whatever it is that you want to offer, or you want to do, or you want to accomplish? Because I'm also a really big believer that if you are putting something out into the world with good intention, with, care, with planning,
Yep.
that people are going to receive it.
Yeah.
If there is someone who it is meant for, they're going to not necessarily just magically find it, right? But they are going to be open to receiving it and taking it on, accepting it, as long as they're able to then find it as well, right?
Right.
And so, I'm a big believer of that. And so if what's holding you back is just the belief that it's not time or you're not ready, that's something to work on.
Yeah. And I feel too, like even just talking to people that maybe have never even walked into a yoga studio or have done yoga a little bit and isn't really sure about whether or not they want to go back, or they've tried it at home and now they're like, should I go in a studio? The biggest thing I can say to those people, especially when it comes to limiting beliefs and feeling like, oh, I can't do yoga. Yoga isn't just the asana practice. Remember that there are 8 limbs of yoga, and you could be practicing yoga while you're doing your dishes and you're thinking, or you're breathing, or you're sitting still in your car right before you go into a big important meeting. Like, start to embrace the little bits and pieces of yoga in your life. And then when you feel ready, go into a studio, but know that there's nothing that's limiting you from walking into a yoga studio but your own thoughts, your own limits, because no one can actually limit you.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they can like put you in a cage for, and make you stay there, but they can't get into your head and they can't change who you are. You can only change who you are and how you react and respond. I just find it really interesting that like, throughout this experience that Allie's had, like, she's super positive about it. She's putting out all the great energy. She's working hard to help other people accomplish their own goals too. And I just really enjoyed talking to her. She's just a really sweet and kind soul.
Definitely. Thank you, Allie, for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. So keep listening, folks. We love, love, love having these interviews and doing these follow-up episodes. We would love to hear from you and hear how yoga changed your life. You can follow us on the gram at Yoga Changed, on the TikTok at Yoga Changed. You can send us an email, yogachanged@gmail.com. This has been so much fun. Allie, again, thanks for your time, and we will catch you next week.
Bye, yogis.
Bye.